A really hard position being her date. It's hard standing next to someone so beautiful and so radiant. So honestly, I'm here to just spend some time with my mom.
Reese Witherspoon is officially back, this time teaming up with Prime Video for a brand new series called Elle. The show promises to take fans on a nostalgic journey into Elle Woods' teenage years, long before she became the most famous Gemini vegetarian to graduate from Harvard Law. Audiences are already buzzing about seeing Elle before the pink suits, before the courtroom triumphs, and before the bend and snap made pop culture history. But here's the twist. Blake Lively, yes, that Blake Lively fashion icon, internet favorite, and self-proclaimed script whisperer, was reportedly once in early talks to join the Legally Blonde universe. Not as a side character, not as a cameo, but as Elle Woods' newest rival. A chic, sharp, stylish antagonist meant to challenge Elle, only to later reveal a hidden vulnerability. On paper, it was Hollywood gold, a blonde-on-blonde showdown that practically sold itself. Behind the scenes, however, things were less bend and snap and more bend and backstab. Multiple insiders say the trouble started before anything was official. Lively hadn't signed a contract, but she was already deeply involved. Writers allegedly began receiving a steady stream of emails filled with her ideas, bold, ambitious, and increasingly self-focused. She reportedly suggested bigger entrances, flashier scenes, and even narrative pivots that elevated her from supporting foil to near co-lead. For a franchise built entirely around Elle Woods' glittery optimism and iconic sparkle, this was a red flag. "I believed in this," Lively once explained in an interview. "I wanted to be part of the storytelling, not just stand on a pink sticker and look cute. For me, fulfillment meant contributing to the writing, the costumes, the narrative." Sometimes directors and producers welcomed that creative input. Other times it felt like an ambush. As one producer put it, "We hired her to act." Suddenly, she wanted authorship. That tension reportedly grew when Lively began showing up to meetings with marked-up script pages, her own rewrites complete with highlighted notes. No longer tossing out casual suggestions, she arrived with a full vision, a rival character reimagined as a Miranda Priestley-style powerhouse, complete with a late redemption arc. Ambitious? Absolutely. But it didn't fit the DNA of Legally Blonde. The franchise thrives on Elle Woods' relentless optimism, cheeky comedy, and unapologetic sparkle. It's not built for heavy, morally gray redemption arcs. According to insiders, what started as a bubbly prequel concept began drifting into darker territory, a brooding clash between two ambitious blondes in shades of gray. That wasn't the Elle Woods fans knew, nor was it the Elle Reese Witherspoon had spent decades carefully shaping. And Reese wasn't just Elle Woods on screen, she was also producer with final say. When Blake's pitches started edging past collaboration and into control, Witherspoon reportedly drew a hard line. She knew exactly what fans wanted, a story true to Elle's world, pink-tinted, humorous, and full of optimism. Not a franchise hijacked into something darker, heavier, and less Elle Woods. For Witherspoon, it was clear. The heart of Legally Blonde had to stay true, no matter how powerful or persuasive the rival pitches became. Reese Witherspoon had built her entire career not only on her undeniable talent, but also on a deep respect for storytelling, for characters that carried weight and for projects that were more than just films. They were cultural moments. That was why, when discussions around Legally Blonde 3 began to gain momentum, she approached it with a mixture of excitement and careful protection. Elle Woods was not just another character to her. Elle was an icon, a symbol of empowerment, resilience, and charm that audiences had cherished for 2 decades. The responsibility of bringing her back was immense. Reese, ever the professional, gathered a trusted team of writers and producers, creating an environment designed to foster creativity while safeguarding the heart of the franchise. At first, it seemed like the project was on solid ground. But Hollywood, with all its glitz and its pitfalls, thrives on ambition, and ambition often clashes when more than one strong personality is in the room. Blake Lively's name had entered the conversation as both a potential creative contributor and a face that could add fresh star power to the sequel. At first glance, it made sense. Blake had proven herself bankable with roles in The Shallows and A Simple Favor. She had recognition from Gossip Girl, and she was admired for her fashion-forward persona and public image. To the studio, she represented not just acting chops, but also a brand that could draw in audiences. For Reese, the idea of collaboration was nothing new. She had worked with powerful talents before, people with their own visions, and had always found ways to merge ideas without compromising story. When Blake first stepped into early discussions, Reese remained diplomatic. She gave her space to speak, nodded politely, and listened with an open mind. This was, after all, how brainstorming often worked, throwing ideas on the wall, seeing what might stick, filtering through suggestions until something aligned with the established vision. But very quickly, Reese realized that Blake was not simply contributing. She was steering, pushing, attempting to redirect the very course of the film's creative vision. What started as small suggestions about Elle Woods' character arc soon expanded into broader demands, storylines that leaned heavily on rivalries, darker tones and complex antagonists that risked overshadowing Ella's wit and charm. To some, these ideas might have seemed bold, even daring. But to Reese and the longtime writers who knew exactly what made Legally Blonde endure, the proposals were red flags. Elle Woods was not meant to be reinvented into a gritty anti-hero tale or a story bogged down by rivalries. She thrived on humor, sharpness, empowerment, and lightness. Audiences didn't want a deconstruction of Elle. They wanted her return, unapologetically pink and unapologetically Elle. The tension in the room grew. Writers, once enthusiastic, began hesitating to share their own thoughts, knowing they might be met with pushback or attempts at redirection. Meetings grew colder. Emails were left unanswered. Calls became vague. Reese, though professional to the core, could feel the weight of what was happening. The energy was shifting. And for her, it was déjà vu, because this was not the first time Blake's involvement in a project had raised questions. Industry whispers had already circulated about It Ends With Us, the Colleen Hoover adaptation that faced delays, rewrites, and behind-the-scenes chaos. Reports hinted that Blake clashed with director Justin Baldoni, pushed for changes in casting, and introduced stylistic demands that clashed with the original vision of the author. What should have been a straightforward emotional adaptation had turned into a storm of creative disputes. The film eventually limped forward, but few insiders felt confident in the final product. Now, Reese was watching the same pattern begin to play out in her beloved Legally Blonde 3. Reese remained composed. She did not lash out. She did not go public. Instead, she internalized the warning signs, choosing to protect the project quietly but firmly. Hollywood veterans like her knew that sometimes the most powerful moves were the ones made in silence. And so, slowly but decisively, the calls that included Blake grew fewer. The invites became less frequent. Without fanfare, without drama, without headlines, Blake was eased out of the project. It wasn't scandalous, it was simply necessary. For Reese, the choice was clear. Elle Woods' legacy mattered more than Hollywood politics. Behind closed doors, the decision brought immediate relief. Writers, no longer constrained by rewrites and power struggles, returned to the heart of the story. The energy that had been drained from the room was restored. Conversations became lively again. The script regained its humor, its spark, its pink glitter magic. Elle Woods was once again the centerpiece, exactly where she belonged. Reese gathered the team, reaffirmed the vision, and reminded everyone what Legally Blonde stood for: empowerment wrapped in wit, charm, and sharp comedy. The heart of the franchise was never about darkness or rivalry. It was about finding strength through positivity, defying expectations with intelligence and style, and proving that femininity and brilliance could coexist powerfully. With Blake gone, that spirit re-emerged, guiding every page of the script and every creative decision moving forward. But Hollywood is never silent. Word always spreads, sometimes quietly, sometimes like wildfire. And as whispers about Blake's quiet removal circulated, so too did conversations about her growing reputation. It wasn't just Legally Blonde 3, it wasn't just It Ends With Us. Insiders recalled her brief attachment to early conversations around Barbie, where she was reportedly considered before being dropped just as quickly. The pattern was becoming difficult to ignore. Blake entering projects during their early development stages, pushing for more influence, advocating for larger roles, and then quietly stepping away or being removed before production truly took off. To some, this was ambition, the mark of a woman who knew her worth and was unafraid to push boundaries. To others, it was sabotage, an inability to collaborate, and a threat to the delicate balance of ensemble filmmaking. The entertainment industry, especially in a post-pandemic era where every dollar counted, was becoming increasingly risk-averse. Studios had little appetite to gamble on personalities that might jeopardize timelines or complicate productions. A single delayed project could cost millions. And so, producers began to view Blake not as a guaranteed star, but as a question mark, a risk. Her talent was never in doubt, but her willingness to collaborate, to uplift a story without reshaping it entirely, was under scrutiny. Could she step into a project and serve the story, or would she demand that the story serve her? Reese, in her grace, never addressed the matter outright. Publicly, she kept her comments measured, focused on the positive, always uplifting the team she worked with. But fans noticed the subtlety in her interviews. When asked about the Legally Blonde 3 writing process, she praised collaborators who respected the story, who trusted the legacy, who uplifted the team rather than themselves. These were not random phrases. They were carefully chosen. And though Reese would never directly name Blake, the contrast was clear. Reese was sending a message. Elle Woods was bigger than ego, bigger than individual ambition, and she would never allow off-screen conflicts to tarnish on-screen magic. Thanks to her leadership, Legally Blonde 3 is now firmly back on track. The script has returned to its roots, the cast is aligned, and production is moving with momentum. The film is poised to honor the legacy that fans have waited for while still offering something fresh, funny, and heartfelt. Elle Woods will walk back onto screens not as a pawn in behind-the-scenes power struggles, but as the unapologetic, brilliant, pink-clad heroine she has always been. And Reese, once again, has proven why she is not just a talented actress, but also a formidable producer and guardian of stories that matter. Blake, for her part, has moved on quietly. No public statements, no press tours explaining her departure, no fiery interviews. Just silence. But in Hollywood, silence speaks loudly. The what-ifs linger. What if she had been able to collaborate? What if she had found a way to align her vision with Reese's? What if this had been the project to solidify her as a powerhouse in both acting and influence? Instead, her exit adds to a growing list of projects where her presence was brief, her impact disruptive, and her departure unspoken. The question now is not why she was removed from Legally Blonde 3. The answer to that lies in the preserved energy of the script, but how many more pink carpets she might quietly be asked to step away from in the years to come. And so the story of Legally Blonde 3 is not just the story of Elle Woods' return, it is also a story of Hollywood's delicate balance, ambition versus collaboration, vision versus legacy, and the fine line between shaping a project and derailing it. Reese Witherspoon, steady at the helm, has chosen wisely, ensuring that Elle Woods remains untouched by off-screen battles and that fans can once again celebrate the character they love without distraction. As for Blake, the future is uncertain. Her talent is undeniable, but in Hollywood, talent is only part of the equation. Collaboration, respect, and trust matter just as much. Without them, even the brightest stars can find themselves dimmed, watching from the sidelines as the pink spotlight shines elsewhere. In Hollywood, stories often begin with dazzling promise, dream pairings, glossy press releases, and whispers of collaborations that seem destined to make headlines. But sometimes, what happens behind closed doors tells a very different story. Such was the case with the rumored involvement of Blake Lively in Legally Blonde 3, a film that fans have awaited for years, one carrying the weight of nostalgia, brand power, and the enduring legacy of Elle Woods. What started as light chatter about an intriguing addition to the cast slowly unraveled into a cautionary tale about ambition, control, and the fragile balance between creative vision and personal influence in the film industry. At the center of it all stood two women, Reese Witherspoon, the actress and producer who not only embodied Elle Woods but also served as the franchise's guardian, and Blake Lively, the Hollywood star admired for her beauty, charisma, and carefully curated public persona. For a brief moment, their paths appeared ready to intersect in a way that could have electrified the screen, a meeting of two blonde icons with fashion, wit, and power to spare. Fans speculated, gossip blogs lit up, and entertainment reporters floated what-if scenarios. What would happen if Elle Woods, the ever-optimistic Harvard Law graduate, squared off against a rival crafted specifically for the third installment? Could Blake Lively, known for her confidence and bold choices, deliver the perfect foil? On paper, it seemed like a match made in pink heaven. Reese would reprise her iconic role while also steering the project as producer, ensuring the story honored Elle's roots. Blake, meanwhile, would bring fresh energy to the series as a sleek, stylish antagonist, someone whose presence could raise the stakes and create juicy, dramatic tension without derailing the heart of the story. Early whispers suggested Blake's character would challenge Elle in both court and culture, serving as a kind of mirror image, elegant yet icy, strong but missing the heart and warmth that defined Ella. The narrative potential was enticing. a clash of personalities that might remind audiences of The Devil Wears Prada, but filtered through Legally Blonde's lighter, quirkier DNA. But beneath the glitter of that idea, cracks began to show almost immediately. Insiders revealed that while contracts were never finalized and no signatures were placed on official documents, Blake began involving herself in the project in ways that startled the creative team. Emails landed in writers' inboxes filled with suggestions, ideas that weren't just collaborative tweaks, but sweeping changes. Characters were reframed, arcs expanded, and storylines tilted toward darker, more ambitious territory. What was supposed to be a rival role started morphing into something far larger, something edging dangerously close to co-lead status. At first, Reese and the team remained diplomatic. Hollywood thrives on collaboration, and input from actors is not unusual. Blake, after all, had long expressed her desire to move beyond simply standing on a set and hitting her marks. She had spoken in past interviews about her hunger for authorship, her need to contribute to the creative process, whether in costume design, character development, or script input. And at times, that hunger had served her well, winning her respect as more than just a performer. But it had also created friction on sets where her contributions clashed with the established vision. That duality, admired ambition versus disruptive overreach, was once again becoming clear. According to one insider, what began as casual brainstorming quickly escalated into assertive demands. Blake reportedly suggested shifting the narrative so her character was not merely Elle's rival, but a misunderstood disruptor who ultimately became the emotional center of the film. In one especially bold move, she is said to have arrived at a meeting with her own printed script pages, marked with highlighted passages, handwritten notes, and structural rewrites. It wasn't just feedback, it was a vision, one that placed her character at the heart of the story. Suddenly, what had been conceived as a stylish side character began to resemble a Miranda Priestley-style powerhouse, complete with a redemption arc that risked overshadowing Elle Woods herself. For the creative team, this was not just unexpected. It was alarming. Legally Blonde had always thrived on buoyant humor, lighthearted satire, and the unapologetic optimism of its heroine. Elle's story was about proving doubters wrong with charm, intelligence, and resilience, not about morally gray showdowns or heavy-handed rivalries. Blake's proposals threatened to shift the tone entirely, pulling the film toward darker waters where redemption arcs and power struggles replaced the sparkle of pink power suits and witty courtroom zingers. It wasn't just a tonal pivot. It was a fundamental reimagining of the franchise's DNA. Reese, ever the professional, handled the situation with grace. She listened politely, nodded during meetings, and left space for Blake's pitches. But behind that calm exterior, she recognized the red flags immediately. Reese had been in the industry long enough to know when creative input enhanced a project and when it endangered its core. She had also witnessed what can happen when egos overpower collaboration. Her role wasn't just to act, but to protect a cultural brand, one that carried decades of fan devotion. Elle Woods wasn't just another character. She was iconic, a symbol of empowerment and wit whose legacy could not be compromised by off-screen drama or creative tug-of-war. The parallels to Blake's other projects did not go unnoticed. Just months earlier, It Ends With Us had become a magnet for behind-the-scenes rumors, delays, rewrites, and reported clashes between Blake and the director. Even the casting process was said to have been mired in disputes, with Blake's stylistic preferences clashing with the author's original vision. While the final film eventually made its way to audiences, whispers of creative conflict lingered, and some insiders quietly pointed to Blake's influence as a source of unnecessary chaos. For Reese and her team, the similarities were impossible to ignore. If those same habits took root in Legally Blonde 3, a film with far greater stakes and expectations, the results could be disastrous. Gradually, the atmosphere in the writer's room began to shift. Meetings became less frequent. Emails went unanswered. Calls grew vague. The quiet decision was made behind closed doors. Blake's involvement would not move forward. No dramatic firings, no public scandal, no explosive headlines, just a firm and discreet step back. She had never signed a contract, and so easing her out required no announcements. It was as if she had never been attached at all, leaving behind only whispers of what might have been. The change was palpable. Once Blake was no longer part of the conversation, the energy in the room lifted. Writers could breathe again, free from the weight of rewrites designed to justify a rival lead. The script was stripped back to its essence, centering Elle Woods exactly where she belonged. The humor returned, The charm resurfaced, and the story once again reflected the light, empowering tone that fans had loved from the very beginning. Reese, steady at the helm, gathered her team, reinforced the vision, and reminded everyone why Legally Blonde had endured for more than 2 decades. Not because of spectacle, but because of its heart. Yet Hollywood never forgets, and the echo of Blake's near involvement lingered in industry circles. Stories spread of her arriving with rewritten pages, of her bold attempts to reshape narratives, of her insistence on creative authority even before contracts were signed. For some, it was a sign of ambition, proof that she wanted more than to be a passive participant. For others, it was sabotage, an inability to support a project without bending it toward her own vision. In a post-pandemic Hollywood landscape already wary of delays and personality-driven conflicts, producers began to see Blake less as a safe bet and more as a risk. Patterns began to emerge. Reports surfaced that Blake had once been in early talks for Barbie, another female-driven franchise juggernaut, only to quietly disappear from the project as quickly as she had entered. The cycle repeated. Initial excitement, whispers of creative friction, and a quiet exit before any official involvement could be confirmed. Taken together, these stories painted a portrait of a star whose confidence and charm, once seen as her greatest assets, were now raising uncomfortable questions about her ability to collaborate. Reese never publicly addressed Blake's rumored involvement in Legally Blonde 3. She didn't need to. Instead, she made subtle comments in interviews, remarks about the importance of collaborators who respected the story, who uplifted the team, and who trusted the legacy of what already worked. The words were graceful but pointed, a clear signal to those who had followed the drama closely. Reese wasn't just protecting a film. She was safeguarding a cultural brand, ensuring that Elle Woods' return would not be derailed by off-screen power struggles. For fans, the message was clear. Elle Woods would return in all her pink-suited glory, armed with wit, charm, and empowering confidence. The project was back on track, with a script that honored its roots and a creative team unified under a single vision. Whatever whispers surrounded Blake's brief involvement, they would remain just that. Whispers, tantalizing what-ifs in Hollywood's endless cycle of speculation. But the cautionary tale lingers.